Four Crowns. Episode 13. The Drowned Truth. Written by Mia. The Deep Keep is not a place you go so much as a place you sink into, and I went down into it the next night with Sable at my shoulder, because when I'd said I was descending to the oldest dark in Vaymore to bargain with a drowned god about the end of the world, he had simply checked his blades and said, "Then I'm going where you're going," in the flat voice he uses for things that are not up for discussion. Down past the Tide District, down past the curing pools, down past even the still black water where Rune goes to be himself, down into the drowned heart of the city, where the stone gets older with every stair and the carvings on the walls stop being any language the four houses remember. The air went thick and cold and ancient, and I understood, descending, that I was walking backward through 300 years of careful forgetting, down toward the thing the founders had buried so deep that the city had built its whole civilization on the lid. I knew something about that, about building a life on top of a buried thing. I'd done it for 26 years, packed the wanting down, poured the carefulness over it, walked around on the lid of myself, and called the walking a personality. There is a particular vertigo to descending toward a thing you've spent your whole life refusing to look at, and I felt it in my knees on every ancient stair. The sense that the bottom, when I reached it, was going to be some version of me, and that whatever the founders had drowned down here was only the city's draft of the same thing I had drowned in myself. "You feel that," Sable murmured beside me, and he wasn't asking. The shadow thread between us had gone taut and strange this far down, both of us closer to the source of what he was made from. Every step down, I feel more like a shard and less like a man. Like the closer we get to the bottom, the more of me remembers it used to be part of something. His voice was very controlled, which is how I know Sable is afraid. I've spent my whole life being exactly one thing, contained, defined, priced. I don't like how it feels down here, like the edges of me are negotiable. The keeper was waiting in the black pool at the very bottom, vast and patient and sorrowful, the four-colored light moving on the water like oil. "You came," it said, "and you brought a shard with you. Good. You'll need to understand them before the end, better than they understand themselves." The water stirred. You want to remake the right. To build a third thing the founders were too frightened to build. A binding that holds the city without caging you, that lets you keep all four without ending the world. It can be done. I have watched 300 years of keystones never once dare to ask how. So listen, little catalyst, because I will only say it the once. And the keeper told me the drowned truth, the whole of it, the thing the founders had murdered the telling of. There had never been four powers. There had been one whole vast world-shaping, alive in my bloodline since before the city had a name, and it had not been a weapon or a god so much as a capacity, the raw ability to remake the world's shape, held by people who'd mostly used it to keep a small place safe and green. The founders had not split it because it was dangerous. They'd split it because they were ambitious, for warlords who wanted the power and could not share it whole, and so they'd shattered it 4 ways and bound a piece into each of their bloodlines, and called the dividing a noble sacrifice, when it had only ever been a robbery dressed as a rescue. I sat with that in the cold because I knew that costume too. Every house that had ever handed me back had called it a rescue, a better placement, a fresh start, what's best for the child, and every single time it had been the same thing underneath. An adult deciding I was too much trouble to keep, and dressing the discard in the language of mercy. The founders had robbed a bloodline blind and carved the theft into 300 years of holy law, and they had done it in the exact accent every careless guardian in my life had used on me. "This is for your own good." I was starting to think the whole of Vaymore and the whole of my childhood had been run on the very same lie, and that I might be the only person alive built, bone deep, to recognize it. The accord wasn't peace. It was 4 thieves agreeing to each keep a quarter of a stolen thing, forever, so none of them had to give it back. And the catalyst, the keeper said, the door at the back of the cage. That was not the founders' mercy after all. That was their guilt. One of the 4 could not live with what they'd done, and hid a key in the bloodline they'd robbed, so that one day the rightful whole might be reassembled by the only hands it ever truly belonged to. Yours. You are not the founder's weapon, Ava. You are the city's restitution. The thing that was taken growing back. Then I take it back, I said. I reassemble it. I become the whole thing again, and I remake the right so the city holds without the lie. That's the 3rd path. Why is everyone so sure it ends the world? Because of what reassembly costs the one who does it. The water went very still. To call 4 shards home through yourself, child, you must open completely. No holding, no door brace shut. The whole drowned capacity flooding back into one mortal body that has only ever held a quarter of it at a time. And a mind that floods like that, with that much all at once, it does not always come back up the same person. It comes back as the power, wearing the person, having forgotten why it ever wanted to be small enough to love 4 men and save a city. The founders watched the first keystone try 300 years ago in this very pool. She came through, but she did not come back as herself. She came back as the whole, vast and serene and utterly indifferent to the small, frightened people who used to be her family, and she had to be. The keeper paused, stopped. That is the apocalypse they feared. Not that the houses end. That you do, and something wears your face that no longer remembers it loved anyone. The cold went all the way through me. Then how does anyone survive becoming everything? Anchors, the keeper said. The first keystone went into the flood alone. You will not. For shards, for men, each holding one thread of you to the small human shore while the ocean comes in. 4 hands keeping the person tied to the world while the power floods through. It is the one thing the founders never thought to try, because the founders did not love anyone, and so it never occurred to them that the cure for becoming a god is being held hard by people who will not let go of the woman even when she stops being able to hold on to herself. The water rippled toward me. You need all 4, Ava. Not 3. Not the council's safe. Severed 3. All 4 threads, all 4 men, anchoring you to your own name while you flood. Or you come back as the thing that has to be stopped. That is why a severance is not mercy. A severance is murder with a longer fuse. I looked at Sable, and Sable, who finds the price of everything, who had just heard the price of the only path that saved us all, had gone white and still in the 4-colored dark. There it is, he said quietly, the number. He laughed, and it was awful and real. I've been running it since the council. The cost of every option. Submit and be caged, I can price that. Sever one of us. I priced that, it's me. I told you it's me. But this one... He looked at me like I was the variable that had finally broken his whole system. You want to become a god and trust 4 men to hold you human through it. There's no number for that, Ava. I can't calculate the odds you come back as yourself. Nobody can. It's the first thing in my entire life I cannot price. And then he did the thing I had never once seen Sable do, the cold exact son of the coldest house in Vaymore. He stopped calculating. I watched him set it down. The whole apparatus. The lifelong armor of arithmetic. And I'm going to back it anyway. That's what I came down here to learn, I think. That there's a kind of thing you can't price, and you pay for it not because the math works, but because the alternative is a world with you missing from it. And I'd rather gamble everything on holding you human than live one safe day in a Vaymore that severed you to feel better. He took my face in his hands, there in the drowned dark, his guard all the way down where only the keeper and the old gods could see. I will hold your thread. When you flood, I will hold on. I don't care that I can't prove it'll work. Some prices you pay, without knowing the number. I'm paying this one. And I understood what it had cost him to say it more, in its way, than Bram's fury or Rune's quiet release. Bram loves by instinct, and Rune loves by depth, but Sable had been built, deliberately, by a mother who carved the softness out of him, into a creature who survives by never wanting anything he can't account for. To love me, he had to dismantle the one defense that had kept him alive his whole life. The refusal to gamble on anything he couldn't prove. He wasn't only offering to hold my thread. He was offering to become, for the first time, a man who bets on a thing he can't calculate, which is the most dangerous act of faith there is for a person who learned in childhood that hope is just a more expensive way to lose. I had never been handed anything more carefully wrapped, or more costly to give. And he kissed me. The strategist who never once in his life made a move he couldn't justify on paper, making this one, and I felt the shadow thread blaze warm and certain even down in that cold, ancient water, and I had to hold the reunion back from surging even there, even then, kissing a man who just agreed to anchor me through the end of the world. I climbed back up toward the surface with the whole terrible shape of it settled in me at last. The third path was real. I could remake the right, take back what was stolen, build a binding that freed me and held the city both. And the only way through was to become everything and trust 4 thrown-away men to hold me to my own name while I did. It was insane. It was the bravest and most dangerous thing anyone in 300 years had dared. And it depended, utterly and absolutely, on all 4 threads staying whole and all 4 men staying close enough to hold on, which meant the council's severance wasn't just cruel anymore. It was lethal. They thought cutting one bond would make me a safe, 3-bound source. The keeper had just told me it would make me a god with 1 too few anchors, the exact recipe for the thing that has to be stopped, which meant I realized climbing that the council had handed me the strangest gift it could have: clarity. For weeks the deadline had felt like a choice between bad options: cut one of them, or lose all of them. Now I knew it had never been a choice at all. There was exactly one road that didn't end in a caged me, a dead me, or a god wearing my face. Keep all 4. Hold them closer than I'd ever held anything, become everything together, and trust 4 pairs of hands to drag me back to my own name. The council thought it was offering mercy. It had actually just narrowed the whole world down to the one brave thing, and the only people I needed to do it were already impossibly mine. I had never in my life felt so frightened or so clear. I had to tell the others. I had to gather all 4 close and hold them closer than I'd ever held anything, because the whole survival of the city and my own soul now ran straight through the bond I'd spent weeks being told to cut. I came up into the Tide District at the gray edge of dawn, Sable a half step behind me, and I knew something was wrong before I saw it, because the shadow thread, warm and certain a heartbeat ago in the deep dark, went suddenly, violently cold. They were waiting at the top of the last stair, House Shadow's own, but wearing the old colors, the deep violet of the lady's personal guard, the faction that had vanished into the district with her when she fell. And at their head, calm and terrible, and smiling the no-warmth smile I knew from the throne room, stood the Lady of Shadow herself, out of hiding at last, looking not at me, but at her son. "Hello, Sable," she said. You've made yourself very useful, telling the catalyst exactly what she needs. All 4 anchors. How illuminating. Her smile widened, which is why I'm going to take one. I reached for him, for the thread, for his hand, for anything, and I was half a second too slow because the Lady of Shadow had spent his whole life learning exactly how to reach her son, and she did something to the shadow thread I had no name for, a wrenching cold command in the old blood language of her house, and Sable's thread didn't sever. It went dark, muffled, captive, yanked under her hand like a dog called sharply to heel. And the cold strategist who had just promised to hold me. Human staggered, and his eyes went somewhere I couldn't follow, and her guard closed around him. You need all 4, the lady said, as her people took my anchor, my Sable, the man who just set down a lifetime of arithmetic to gamble on me. So you'll have 3, and you'll come and beg me for the 4th, and the price of him will be your willing submission to the cage. Or you'll try your little apocalypse with 1 anchor missing. Her smile was the cruelest thing in the drowned city, and come back as the thing I'll finally, righteously, be allowed to put down. Either way, catalyst. I win. And the shadow thread went silent in my chest, and they were gone into the violet dark with Sable, and I stood at the top of the stair with 3 threads and a death sentence, and the dawn coming up cold over a city that had just learned how to truly hurt me. To be continued. That was episode 13 of 4 Crowns. If the 4 of them have you now, the next episode is already waiting. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The complete book is on Amazon, and early episodes plus bonus scenes are on my Patreon. Links are in the description.
I've Mia.
Thank you for listening.